Welcome, everyone. I'm Melissa Donovan, editor of Digital Output Magazine, and thank you for joining us on today's talk about digital textile printing. Now, as we know, textile printing really encompasses many applications. That goes going from home decor, apparel, signage. And it is a buzz. Print service providers are definitely hearing about it left and right, but they may be a bit weary of entering into a lot of these applications, especially apparel or decor. They might not have the staff or time to work with design houses or different clothing and decor brands. But this doesn't mean you have to opt out of printing to textiles completely. And one option is to offer current clients soft signage. This is popular for a number of reasons and used by many different industries, from retail to events. Soft signage can be printed using both direct and transfer sublimation, in addition to alternative ink sets. Prior to purchasing a textile printer, print service providers should consider the application's output on the device and where they'll be placed, namely indoor or outdoors, the nuances between each technology and how they will fit into their current operation, as well as future. And we would also think it's good to look specifically at media handling and compatibility, as well as ink set, dual role capability, and productivity. We plan on addressing this and more today, but first I'd like to thank the sponsor of this event, Canon Solutions America. And now I'm going to introduce our guests and invite each to share a bit about their company and what sets them apart from the competition, specifically discussing products and services offered within the large format segment. Let's first start with Canon. We're represented today by John Ingram. He's the Senior Marketing Specialist of Dye Sublimation at the company. And welcome, John. I'm going to invite you into the stream here. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you for moderating this event. Canon Solutions America offers a wide range of large format printers, imaging supplies, and finishing solutions. Specifically in digital textiles, we're offering the dye sublimation printers from DGI. We're offering transfer papers, fabrics, as well as finishing and sewing solutions and heat presses. For us, one of the things that we do when we're working with customers is that we talk about our nationwide service and support network and the ability to offer leasing options through Canon Financial Services. And that allows our customers to have a single source for digital textile printing applications.
All right, thanks, John, for joining us again today, and we'll invite you back in a second after we introduce a couple more of the panelists. And second, we're going to have to bring in with us Mike Silverson. He's the textile manager at Durst North America. Welcome, Mike, and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate being part of the conversation. So I'm with Durst. A little bit about us. We're an 85-year-old family-owned company. Headquartered in northern Italy and based with our U.S. Headquarters also in Rochester, New York. Our focus has primarily been focused on digital imaging, converting from analog to digital processes. We focus on a pretty wide range of products. Large format certainly is one of our big mainstays. Ceramic tile conversion from analog to digital, label, packaging, corrugated, full suite of software solutions, and of course textile, including what we're here to talk about today with Dye Sub. We're constantly investing in new products, new technologies, trying to make more environmentally conscious products, such as our water-based inks. We've got a whole network of cross-country of sales and service that can help anybody with any of these processes. If anybody's interested, please check out Durst US, and look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. We'll invite you back in a second. And we also want to welcome Tomar Ohavi. He's the product marketing manager at EFI. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Hi, Melissa, and my dear colleagues from worldwide companies. A pleasure to be here. My name is Tomer. I'm working for EFI for about 5 years at the product marketing for the soft signage ViewTech FiberView product line. A little bit about EFI. EFI is a global digital solutions provider, printers, ink, service, the whole ecosystem. We are focusing on basically any technology available on the digital market, from corrugated to display graphics, through apparel and textile, ceramics, tiles, and much more. And of course, one of our divisions are designated for the soft science applications. We have, I would say, a very wide range of sublimation solution, either from the entry level to the mid-level solutions, to the high volume providers. And again, we're here to offer and also share with you our knowledge for being one of the pioneers in the market of the sublimation on digital printers, specifically from analog to digital. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We'll talk a little bit more, and I'm going to invite in Dave Conrad. He's the large format partner business manager, graphic solutions business at HP. Hi, Dave. How are you?
Hey, Melissa. Thanks. I appreciate the invite. I'm happy to be included in the panel discussion with some of my very accomplished peers in the industry. So thanks again for inviting me. A little bit about me. I've been in the printing industry for a little over 20 years. Most recently, for the past 3 years with HP, dedicated mainly to the textile market and the HP dye sublimation initiative, which is HP Stitch and the Stitch family of printers. We launched 2 years ago, I guess, at ISA. A little bit about the printer line itself. The Stitch family of dye sub printers consists of 3 models. There's an entry-level S300 that's 64 inches wide, has 4 print heads. There's a production model, the S500, also 64 inches, that has 8 print heads. And then we have the industrial 3.2 meter or 10-foot S1000. And what's really unique about these printers is that all 3 printer models are capable of printing to transfer paper or to direct to fabric using the same ink set. So it's a one printer, multiple application concept, and took about a little over 2 years to develop. And the reason it took a little while to get to market is Stitch was created specifically for the dye sub market to help simplify and improve the current technology that had been on the market for years. And I only have a couple of minutes here, so I don't have time to get into a lot of detail. But through patented, what HP calls technology assets, we've been able to improve the dye sublimation printing experience in several areas, starting with increased productivity, mainly through the use of user replaceable thermal inkjet printheads. So anyone can swap out a printhead now. You don't need to be an expert. Plus, our printheads have 4 times the amount of nozzles as an ordinary printhead, which provides incredible redundancy. Less waste with Stitch. We dry the ink in the print zone, so there's no cockling. We eliminate the expansion and contraction of the paper by drying the ink right in the print zone. Plus, it reduces head scrapes and crashes, and ultimately, you have a lot less waste. Stitch has improved image quality, mainly through our ink chemistry, but also with the help of an onboard spectrophotometer that comes with all 3 printer models. And then we've reduced the manual maintenance virtually to 0 on these printers. Everything is automatic, including the printhead cleaning and the nozzle monitoring. So overall, we really just simplified the printer operation, made it easy to use, less manual maintenance, very intuitive, web connected. There's a large touch screen front panel on all 3 models, and it makes it really simple to run. So being part of the introduction of the HP Stitch family of dye sublimation printers has really been exciting, and having the opportunity to share a little bit about it with you and your audience today is much appreciated. So thanks again for inviting me.
Well, thank you for attending, and we'll invite you back in 2 seconds to talk with everyone else. Last but very much not least, we're going to introduce Randy Anderson. He's a product marketing manager at Muto America Inc. Welcome, Randy.
Thank you, Melissa. Glad to be here. Glad to be here with my associates in the industry. My name is Randy Anderson. I've been with Muto America for a little over 16 years. Most of that time spent in dye sub and textile applications. Muto's been in business since 1952. They're a little bit older than I am, not too much, but they're in that same range. And we started out actually in the drafting and in the industry, making drafting arms and drafting tables, and we moved that up to do cutters and plotters, and then eventually into printing. And so our printers, like the RG900, is an entry-level printer with no chips that allows people to improvise and put a variety of different inks into that printer to experiment and create new markets and new products for the industry. And from there, we just move up. We've got a wide range of industry standard printers for doing high quality dye sublimation work in our 1682 WR. And then we've got a 1948, which is a 4-head printer for high-speed production for industrial applications. Thank you, Melissa.
All right, thanks, Randy. We're actually going to invite everyone back in to join the conversation now. Hello, everyone. All right, so we're talking a little bit about soft signage today. Now, if a sign shop isn't already offering it, it's really a great addition to any business. I think we can all agree. Now, a few reasons specifically is because signage, when it's used with fabric, it really gives off a high quality appearance. It's very cost effective to ship due to lightweight. And related to this, it's considered fairly eco-friendly. Now, Tomar, can you elaborate a bit on one of the points I just made, which is about the high quality appearance? And just I want to mention, if any of you want to jump in after Tomar speaks about this topic, and this is true going forward, please feel free to. And go ahead, Tomar.
Thanks, Melissa. So definitely, when we look on the market, we see customer looking, for three, I would say, main. The second one is efficiency, and I would say maybe the most interesting one is new applications. But when we talk about quality, people want, brighter images. They don't want to compromise about density. They want to reach out to the specific, Pantone or specific, gamma they want to reach out. And today, I think the technology evolves to a way it can allow it. And definitely inside coming from the pigments and also the fixation units, all together, the whole system solution allowed to reach higher quality with customers just, keep demanding, right? Applications become much more closer viewed than before. If you look on the second pillar, as we've mentioned, the efficiency, specifically after COVID-19, right? People are double clicking about each one of those elements. What is my ink yield? What is my service cost? And I think, so the sublimation and specifically also, talking about the FabriView line, give you definitely a lot of advantage on the ongoing serviceability, cost saving, media saving. And I think, we see owners, take a little bit more time and putting things into the Excel spreadsheet. Okay, what I'm going to expense in a year or two from now. And the third thing, you also mentioned, and we see the customers looking for new application, and this is actually very exciting. Every week, every few weeks, we see, people do something really new. I just looked on a picture I got from colleagues from Las Vegas. It was, I think, the first public show out of America in Las Vegas, the concrete show. You saw so many new backlit applications like stretching ceilings, and some other really nice industrial application. So every time it wows me, where sublimation market can go and grow, and definitely, quality, efficiency, new applications, and we also feel and see that with the FabriView line, with the sublimation line, we can really, adhere to those requirements from the market.
Right. Thanks, Tomar. Did anyone else want to comment on high quality appearance that we can kind of get with soft signage? I mean, I know I personally, when I'm out and about, I think looking at a graphic in, say, Target that was printed with fabric versus something on a board sometimes, I mean, there's such a difference, and it would maybe, push me to purchase one thing over another. Not that I'm speaking ill of boards or anything, but...
There's a familiarity with fabric that I don't think you get with some of the other substrates, and I think that's part of it, and that's why it resonates so well, especially in a retail environment, because you're in fabric, you're wearing fabric, you're around it all the time. So there's an inherent familiarity that you get with it, and I think there's my perception. I feel like there's maybe a little more inherent elegance to a fabric printed product. Especially in a retail scene. I think that's really a particularly nicer area to see that kind of product. Obviously, there's a lot of logistic advantages when you start looking at fabric for some of the other industries, such as trade show and event and things of those natures. But particularly in that retail space, I think that's really that to me is one of the really big pluses of fabric.
Plus all the varieties of fabric. I mean, there are new varieties of fabric every year that come out for specific applications. So you can closer match the fabric to your design, to your brand, for lack of a better term.
All No, that's so true. John?
Yeah, and Randy, you and I can remember when we first started doing sublimation stuff, you had poplin and you had poplin. And if you like, we could get you some thicker poplin or thinner poplin, but that was about it. And I think when I started digital textile way back when I was at Iris Graphics, we were doing this where we had paper. The fabric was glued onto paper, and we were using it for proofing. And talk about where we've gone from there. Now we're looking at, people are looking at all sorts of things. We've got, it was that merger of being able to have that printhead technology with the ink technology coming in at the same time that these customized fabrics came into play. And now the fabric manufacturers are designing fabrics that are treated properly to make it really easy for us. The only thing I can remember is when we, started doing the paper industry, when you start to go from, what was plain paper, which was all designed for offset, then laser, and then finally became inkjet. We're finally seeing the benefits of the market coming together, both from the printer manufacturer, the ink technology, with the fabrics to be able to make these stunning, output for all sorts of applications. Where people would have said, "Well, I'm just using it for this niche application." Now you have all sorts of ideas and opportunities that are available now in digital textiles.
Absolutely. And, stunning is one part of it. It's one thing to look pretty, but I think it also has a lot of practical features as well. And Dave, one of them I mentioned in my intro, but that eco-friendly angle. Can you comment a bit about that?
Side, it really starts, we're talking about the inks. The ink that we're talking about is low energy water-based dispersed dye sublimation ink, and it can be used for both direct dye sub and transfer dye sub printing. So first, it's water-based, right? So it's very environmentally friendly and safe. And then in addition to being water-based, there are other sustainable steps manufacturers can take to create a more eco-friendly product. For example, like other OEMs, HP has dye sub inks that have the Eco Passport by Ecotech certification. And for those not familiar with the Eco Passport certification, it basically means that the ink has undergone an analysis to make sure that each individual ingredient or component of the ink meets the requirements of the certification process and that it's not harmful to human health. And also talking about sustainability, the dye sublimation process, as we know, requires polyester material, and polyester can be created through the use of recycled plastics. For example, plastic bottles, when you toss them in the recycle bin, they get sorted, they get cleaned, the labels and the caps get taken off them, they get melted down into little pellets. And then ultimately those little pellets get turned into various types of polyester fabrics. To Randy's point, different types of fabrics that can be used in dye sublimation for printing to create beautiful images for soft signage, but also apparel, home decor, fashion, and other stuff as well. Plus the majority of trade shows today, they won't even accept any other material other than polyester fabric for their displays, not just because of its high quality and image quality, but because it's so easy to recycle. And then I think lastly, for sure, digital printing is definitely more environmentally friendly than, say, offset or screen printing. You don't really waste any ink with the digital dye sub printing process since it's all consumed in the print itself, and you don't have the used materials that you do with offset or screen printing, things like plates and blankets and screens that all eventually end up in a landfill somewhere and possibly affecting air and water quality. So all of these things help to contribute to the eco-friendly nature of digital dye sublimation printing.
Right. Thanks, Dave. And I think you mentioned it already, but another thing to point out is the fact that a soft piece of signage is fairly easy to reuse. And when I speak of reusing, I mean use it at one trade show and then bring it to another one 2 months down the line. Now, Randy, could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we just need to look a little bit back in history of what we were doing before. It was all vinyl banners, and vinyl banners will you roll them up and maybe they'll stick the back to the front, and so you may only get one use out of them. A nice thing about textile is you wad it up, throw it in a box. When you get there, steam it out, and it looks brand new. So as long as you're still on the same branding theme, you can continue to use that graphic over and over and over again. Take it home and wash it, bring it back in. We just did that for the trade show that there's a graphics pro show this week. We did that. We brought in all our dye sub stuff, took it to the laundry, put it back up, steamed it up, it looks brand new. So that's the real advantage there. And like Dave said, the polyester is recyclable. So yeah, this year it's a bottle. Next year it's a soft sign. Year after that, it could be a pair of leggings for jogging pants.
That would be an interesting way to track the life cycle of that for sure. Now, so we talked about some of the points. What I want to or the benefits, I should say, of using soft signage. Let's discuss some current trends, and these could be application specific. I mean, they're micro trends, macro trends. But anyway, John, what are you seeing for trends in the soft signage space?
Yeah, one thing just to point out in terms of the eco-friendliness. Remember that dye sublimation, for people who are listening, is a dry process, meaning there's no post-washing and steaming. And for those who have been in textile, knowing how much water is wasted in a traditional textile process. And there was this quote I read the other day, and it's from a gentleman from SPG Prints, and that I think is really indicative of why it's so beneficial to be in digital textiles. And he said, if all the linear meters in the world during 1 year were printed by digital textile printers instead of conventional printing, we would save over 760 billion liters of water, which could provide human beings on the planet with 2 liters of water, clean water per day for 50 days. That's an astonishing statistic when I saw that. And, but it's almost like, when we get in, for us, the manufacturers of digital printing technology, to be able to offer a process that actually is beneficial from a sustainability standpoint is really great. Now, in terms of applications, what we're seeing is that now that we're post-pandemic, we're seeing that a lot of people are coming back into soft signage. They want to get back in. They were making other things like masks, or they were making other types of materials to get by. But now that they're seeing that the shops are opening up, they're now coming into play saying, all right, this is where we're going to go with the applications. The other area that we're seeing a lot of growth is actually, from my standpoint, was in fluorescence. A lot of people are adding fluorescence, as fluorescent yellow or fluorescent pink, for example, into their graphics to get a little extra pop on one side, but also to get a greater color gamut to be able to have that. So those are two of the trends that we're certainly seeing going forward. Okay.
Excellent, thank you. And I love that stat too on the sustainability and the water. That's crazy. Does anyone else want to throw any info in on specific trends they're seeing before I move on to the next topic?
I think we hit a lot of them, but trade show graphics and exhibits, and I think Randy touched on it, or someone said, as far as the lightweight and the ability to transport and ship that around. You can fold it, you can send it, you don't got to put it in a tube. It costs less, it's easier. It transports a lot nicer than the vinyls and whatnot. But I think trade show exhibits, event displays, SCG, silicone edge graphics, we're seeing that is really popular for high-end graphics and people who want to portray that image, right? The high-end image. Even banner stands and pop-up displays, ideal for soft signage applications. They're more durable and they can be changed out, shipped for less money, and stored more easily. So I think those are all, even we keep talking, they keep coming up, but I mean, outdoor durable fabrics, even, for banners, fence and building wraps, awnings, umbrellas, tents, and canopies. I mean, those are other applications that people now with soft signage and the ability to print and put them outside and transport them easy is.
I think one of the other beauties of soft signage in general, especially Dave mentioned it with the SEG graphics. If you think about the retail environment, you have an ability now to have products that can be shipped out to a retail establishment and oftentimes be installed by somebody who works at the retail place, versus having to bring in a team of installers to, say, install self-adhesive vinyl or change out a fixed banner stand. So it simplifies a lot of these pieces when you think about that entire logistic chain of printing, supplying graphics, and changing graphics out. And tie in all the being able to use recycled fabrics, having a recyclable product. There's really a lot of positives here to the entire chain.
Absolutely. Tomar, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I want to say something. I really agree with my colleagues here, but one more point, from the owner, from the print provider, that sublimation become much more, I would say, achievable, much more. I would say even a little less professional to handle. You need less skills in your, operational work because it's much more easy to use. the veterans can say how difficult was it, to color match, the fibers to the media to the color Pantone. I think today the printer, the technology evolves to a way that you can really enter to this world much more easily than years before. So people dare to do it, sometimes more than before.
All right, thank you. Now, I think it's obviously been an interesting year across the board, more than a year, really, for everyone with the COVID-19 pandemic. And like many other segments of our industry, soft signage was affected. And we could even say maybe a bit more heavily in the sense we've all discussed how it's so popular in trade show usage, and trade shows just haven't existed now for quite some time. But how is it faring as we kind of enter this recovery period, Mike? What have you been seeing or hearing from customers?
Well, it started basically when everything got shut down about a year ago. A lot of companies basically just sort of stopped for a while. Many pivoted into something else, PPE, face masks. That was a really big application for a while. What we're seeing now is, I think, a general rebound of the industry. We're starting to see trade shows happening. The Big World of Concrete show just happened last week. That was probably the first big benchmark show. So that was really, really happy to have that one. Print shows are starting to come back. So we're seeing a lot more optimism. Trade show companies I talk with, a lot of them are starting to do a lot more bidding again. Production's starting to ramp back up. Retail rollouts have been coming back. There's generally a lot of optimism in the market, I think, at this point. And for all of us, my colleagues on this call as well, are all pretty excited about that, because I think there's been a lot of pent up interest in getting into dye sub that's been building for a number of years, and the last 18 months really kind of put a hamper on some of that. So I think there's a lot of pent up interest in it.
Great. So I want to talk a little bit about the actual print technology right now. And as I mentioned in the intro, it's kind of important that a print service provider determine the type of method that kind of works best for their company prior to purchasing it. And there are options. There's transfer or direct dye sub. And then there's hybrid, which you can print both technologies on a one device, which is kind of a fairly new printer offering. And then you can also print on textiles using UV or eco solvent, which we're really not going to talk about today, but I do want to make sure that is out there. Now, if you're a PSP that's determined to print using sublimation, Mike, going back to you, why would that PSP decide to choose transfer per se over direct, or vice versa?
It's funny. It's a question I get quite a bit, and there's never an easy answer to that question. Some of it depends on the kind of products that a particular PSP is doing. Others may be dependent on their experience and what they want to do. For example, we just released a new system called the P5 Tex, which has a great new feature for inline sublimation. For a PSP that has maybe a limited range of products, or doesn't have the real estate, or want to invest in a standalone heat press, they can bring a system like that in and be able to print inline in one step and have a finished product off of the machine. I think at the end of the day, having flexibility on the platform is really important. Using that same example, so say a customer has maybe a limited range of fabrics, they print on 4 or 5 specialty products, they get a new application where they might need to get a fabric that is not prepared for a direct print, maybe an upholstery fabric or an apparel type fabric, which is generally transfer. Having a platform where you can easily pivot to that and be able to print transfer paper becomes very important. So something like the iSub, it allows you to do all of those things. So it's a complicated question, because if it's somebody who's just doing home textile or just doing apparel, they're more likely than not going to move to a transfer setup. Somebody who's in maybe the retail and trade show event graphic space becomes a little more nuanced. I know some companies that have 40 or 50 different products, and they may change out 20 or 30 of them in a day. In that case, maybe a transfer application makes a little more sense. If it goes back to John's sort of we had poplin. If it's we have those 4 or 5 fabrics. We have a frontlit, a backlit, a black back fabric for block out, a flag, a fairly limited range of fabrics. An inline system's a really, really good way to go because you can maximize your throughput, reduce your waste, reduce your environmental footprint without transfer paper or any of the excess energy required on a heat press. So it's a complicated answer, I think, if you really dive into it.
Absolutely. Now, Randy, do you want to kind of throw your hat in the ring and say maybe why transfer dye sub might be a good candidate for soft signage?
Well, yeah, I think it depends upon what level and what quantities you're printing. But the nice thing about dye sublimation is the real limitation is your imagination. So if you're printing soft signage, a soft signage is the same thing as a tabletop. And if you're doing a tabletop, why won't you do mugs and cups and coasters and name tags and all the things you can do with dye sublimation? So for me, at the level that we typically sell into, it's an easy answer. The transfer allows you to do anything you could do with dye sub. And so that creates a whole package. So they're not coming to you for soft signage, but going down the street to get their name tags and mugs and cups and things like that. So it keeps it all in-house and keeps the customer captive.
No, that makes perfect sense. And John, I think you'd be inclined to agree that transfer sublimation is a very good starting point for a PSP just kind of getting into the space.
Oh, absolutely. For just what we talked about, usually when somebody's looking at dye sublimation, unless they're specifically looking at a double-sided viewing type application like flags, and Randy pointed out quite succinctly as well, is that with transfer, it's essentially paper printing. So a lot of people, if they're used to doing printing already with, let's say photo printing, even on their, like glossy photo paper and stuff, and they're transferring over to sublimation, that switch is very, it's an easy jump. When it comes to the fabric, then it becomes a little bit more challenging. And then the last part, of course, is when you waste transfer paper, you're talking about a low cost. When you start wasting fabric, that becomes higher. You go from pennies to dollars. And I think that makes a huge difference. So I usually tell people if they're starting out, get in the transfer business first. And then as you start growing your business and you start seeing the applications you need for double-sided printing, then it makes more sense to start looking at that as you get your feet more wet into the business.
All right, and then Tomar, if you wanted to maybe share why direct sublimation might be a good idea. And I also think it's interesting to talk about here too, is when you're doing direct sublimation, you need to pay attention to some of the footprint issues that you might have in-house, because you might need a heat transfer device that could take up extra space as well, in addition to the printer.
Yes, so definitely this is a great point, Melissa. And actually, I agree with my colleague here, Mike. It's definitely a challenging question, and by the way, and by the end, I think the answer is really to learn, our customers' workflow and how they can really know to operate the equipment and their floor space. I think, what the technology brought to have a 2-in-1 and inline fixation definitely, made the direct sublimation much more easier, much more approachable. And this is why I think it's also, we'll see it much more growing. There is the pros and cons, as my colleagues mentioned, about versatility of different media types. But I think overall, today with the better, ink technology and disperse pigments, and getting better quality with the direct, and the inline fixation would give you really nice uniformity of backlights or fronted even. I think we'll see it as a growing portion versus the transfer. So yeah, definitely, I think the method of the workflow and how much labor you can involve in your production and what is your end user application, definitely it's a factor you have to balance. And for space, as you mentioned, you have to take the electricity, your rental cost, everything around. And again, 2-in-1 with having the inline fixation. I think, as EFI brought it to the market over 2.5 years ago, we bought the inline fixation. I think one of the first to the market, enabling customer the ease of use of it. And I see that those seeds in the market really grow, and customer understand the benefit of it over the time. And again, it's much more achievable at the beginning if you enter to this world and you're new to this.
All right. Thanks, Tomer. Now, I think it's pretty obvious that there's advantages to both direct and to transfer, and it really depends on many, many factors. And primarily, it's what the PSP is looking for, what they plan on doing with it, their space, etc. But because there's advantages to both, there's this beautiful thing now called, we're referring to as hybrid devices. And Dave, you briefly mentioned this in your intro, but can you talk a bit about these printers and, kind of state the obvious, but why they would be an attractive option?
Sure. Sure. It's really more a factor of the ink being used than the printer, right? I mean, typically the printer can handle either a direct-to-fabric dye-sub ink or a paper transfer dye-sub ink, but many times those are two different chemistries, right? And it could require two dedicated printers, or one printer that incorporates a dual ink delivery system, or might require the ink delivery system to be completely flushed in between print jobs when going back and forth between direct and transfer applications. Something unique, HP has developed our own low-energy dispersed dye-sub ink that's suitable for multiple applications like soft signage, but also sportswear, fashion, and home decor. So depending on the application, you can choose either a transfer or direct printing process based on the desired result, all while using the same ink in the same printer. So for example, you would most likely prefer direct printing for things like flags and backlets, where you want to have some heavy saturation for double-sided viewing, or for dark colors that won't wash out if you put them in, say, a light box. But transfer printing would be preferred for other applications like home decor, fashion, and especially sportswear. So the big advantage, like you said, point out the obvious, is to the PSP is versatility of using a single ink to print transfer paper or direct to fabric, which allows the PSP to expand their applications and save on space and overall costs with a one printer, one inkset hybrid solution.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Does anyone else want to throw any input in on that? Where I'm just going to, kind of close the loop, and we're going to move on to a bit about ROI and cost of adding the technology.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that hybrid printers aren't that new. Muto had one over 10 years ago, so hybrid printers have been around for a while. HP has certainly moved it into a different frame of reference. I will admit that.
Nope, that's true. It's all John.
Same idea, yeah, because it's and as Dave pointed out, it's a lot has to do with the ink solutions, and when you develop an ink system that can work both with transfer and as well as with direct, that chemistry is just a little bit different in terms of the dispersants and the like. But in terms of being able to then put it into a printing system, I agree with Randy. This is there's a number of printers. We offer hybrid printers as well as DGI with the FH3204 system. So they're out there. And as Dave pointed out rightly, it provides that flexibility. Mm-hmm. So if a person wants to start on transfer, great, you can do transfer. You want to start going into doing more direct stuff, that's available to you as well. And that's really the key to those systems.
Exactly. All right. So let's talk a bit about the cost of adding new technology. It's definitely always daunting, anything with the price tag is. So what can we say to our viewers today that are on the fence about taking up soft signage and subsequently purchasing a dedicated textile printer for soft signage? How can we kind of convince them that the benefits outweigh any of the risks? And I'm going to ask you all to kind of go around and give your take. So let me start with Randy. What can you say?
Well, the big investment typically that people get hung up on is the heat fixation unit. So if you're running a calendar, typically that calendar unit's going to be more than the initial printer. Yeah. But if you shop around and get a calendar that's appropriate, if you get an oil drum-filled calendar, that will take the input from 4 or more printers oftentimes. So that investment that they're making, if they make the proper investment now, if they want to double the production, they only need another printer. They want to quadruple the production, they only need, to quadruple the printers. They don't need to quadruple their heat setting fixation unit. So that's a big advantage there. And the other, again, I'm just going to reiterate that dye sublimation is really limited by the imagination of the person that's applying themselves. So anything you can imagine can be polyester coated and run through a press or a heat unit, you can make. So it's just a fantastic way to start. And starting with banners and soft signage is an easy way to start.
Mm-hmm. All right, John, if you could.
Yeah, a lot of shops that we've talked to as well have been outsourcing because they see, oh my God, it's a daunting challenge to get into dye sublimation. And as the products that all the companies here are offering have focused on that one area to try to make the printers easier to work with, to make it easier to, to calibrate, to align, to make sure the inks, in the old days, the inks didn't work with the printers because we were working with solvent printers that had sublimation ink in them. And every once in a while they worked and they didn't, we're not in that game anymore. So for those a lot of apprehension, a lot of fear because of that. Oh my God, I heard the stories. And, but that is the kind of faded away. And those people that are outsourcing are really leaving money on the table. I mean, if you do the cost calculations, you're talking anywhere between 30, 40, 50, even 60% that you're leaving on the table that you're actually giving to someone else. So being that digital textiles is really the only other growth market out there next to, for example, corrugated printing, it's really the place to be. And Randy pointed out correctly. I always say, if you can put polyester on it, we'll figure out how to sublimate it.
Thanks, John. Dave, what about you?
You hear me?
Yep.
Oh, I'm here. I would just say, it's start by saying, how can you not afford to? I think, John kind of alluded to some of the numbers here. How can you not afford to get into textiles? It's where the growth is, right? Digital inkjet printing is the fastest growing segment of the printed textile market. The textile industry itself is huge. It's expected to be like $1.7 trillion by 2023. And I think it's like the 7th largest industry in the world. The printed textile industry is supposed to be like $308 billion in the next couple of years. And they say the digital print opportunity of that is going to be about $3.6 billion. And that digital print opportunity is what we all are, right? We're the printers, the presses, the calendars, and then you got the consumables, the papers and the fabrics. And of that 3.6 billion, about 60% of it's going to be, printed on polyester. Total square foot is going to be printed on polyester. So, if you're looking for a growth play in a market that offers new applications with increased revenue and higher margin opportunities, you really need to look at digital textile printing. And then, once you convince yourself that you need to check it out, do your homework. Find a printer that provides the biggest bang for your buck, one that's easy to learn, simple to run, has good flexibility with regard to multiple applications, and provides the most maintenance-free operation so you can reduce the learning curve and maximize production right from the start. So yes, I do believe and think that digital textile printing is a great opportunity to explore if you're on the fence.
All right. Thanks, Dave. And Mike, what about you? Oops, you're muted, sir.
Oh, echoing everything Randy, John, and Davis have said so far. The historic challenges of getting into dye sub, especially on the large format or grand format side, those challenges are largely gone now. Material handling challenges, ink sets. I'm thinking back to my first dye sub inks, which were oil-based inks back in the early 2000s that had their own set of unique challenges along with the solvents. All of that is largely gone now. So from a PSP standpoint, who's looking to make an investment, I would say looking at platforms that have ease of use, being able to run reliably, consistently with high quality is going to be a key component of that. The other part to really dive into is looking at the ROI, because the ROIs on a dye sub system, especially when we start looking at the higher volume systems, the numbers of the amount of money a PSP outsources can be surprisingly low before it justifies investing on the cost of bringing it in-house. And I think that's really the key right now, is where this growth is still very strong, as Dave mentioned. Their margins are also healthy because of that. and it's a really good time to jump into this market now. The learning curves are they've largely been eliminated. The tools have gotten a lot better. Everything. If I were to pick a time, now is probably the best time to get into it.
Great. And Tomar, what about you?
Yeah, and also, the question of benefit versus risk is the biggest one, and my colleagues, said it truly. And I would say three things, to anyone that really hesitate, and it's adhere to what my colleagues are saying, but I will go through the journey. And what I like about the digital industry and the teams here, we really respect each other. Competitions in one hand, but really like technology and everything like bonds together. Go to the journey and ask a couple of questions. What I do today and what I want to do in 4 years. Do I want to grow in volume? Do I want to grow in application? Am I going to have another backup for redundancy, or I want to have 2 units? Then if I have 2 units, I can take 1 calendar. But if I go 1 unit, maybe I have to go to the inline calendar, not necessarily go to the inline fixation, right? I would help, asking those questions and then go and choose the right printer, because usually, we see a printer and say, okay, this is what I want to have. But before you go to you have 70 inch, you have 133 inch, you have 204 inches, what should I choose? So first of all, where I want to be in 2 years. The second thing is the guys talked about ROI, but I see customers still afraid because some of them had to put people in furlough, right, or fire them, right? Can I hire another 1 or 2? And they want to to be slim and fast. And I would say again, as Mike said, calculate the inks, the electricity, the footprint, the media waste, all of this put together. It looks obvious, but many print providers don't really do that, and I would advise. And the last thing I would say, it's not about only the printers. As much as we all like printers, build your own, I would say bracket your net, like your calling management team, your media providers, your service, your designer, who's going to be your shipment agency. Put all this together, if I gladly do the service and the inks and the printers and the firing, but look around and make the whole chain, because otherwise you will decrease your risk and you can benefit more. And this is what can make you take this jump into the textile, because definitely it's a big market, but if you want to reduce the risk, do your homework and go through the journey.
All right, thank you, all of you. We're going to take a few questions. One came in before the webinar started, and someone was asking, what is the current growth curve with soft signage as opposed to typical color printing? And I don't know what do you guys think typical color printing might mean, but I'll let you guys answer the question. So, anybody? Dave.
Yeah, as far as numbers, you see the application switching to soft signage from, I'll say, traditional color printing using vinyls, using banner. Traditionally, what you've seen for applications like in arenas and event type situations, you're seeing trade shows and things like that switching over to soft signage. It's a higher quality image. It portrays a higher image for the brand who's being printed on. It's easier for all the reasons that we kind of talked about today. That growth curve for printing on textiles, whether it's soft signage, whether it's home decor or furnishing or sports apparel, is growing, and that's what we talked about here a little bit as far as the growth opportunities. I just think you're going to see that surpass what you see with traditional printing, because everyone wants to get in, make more money, set themselves apart, be a little unique, and then provide a higher quality image for the customer. So I think that's what they're getting with dye sublimation and textile printing, and you're going to see the growth curve for that just really take off here.
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen some of the studies I've seen have shown many of the other print technologies kind of flattening off a little bit in terms of their growth curves, where dye sub in particular, large format soft signage applications has been really on a more aggressive growth curve right now. And that's not to say none of the other industries growing. It's all growing still. It's just we're seeing the soft signage side growing at a much faster rate as compared to some of the other technologies right now.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I would just also add, we're looking on the ROI from the print owner side, but let's look about how much it can sell a square foot. And as Dave said, uh, the soft channel applications are most of them, some of them can be even premium application that can be, you can charge for, and your revenue per square feet definitely grows. So if you look on the vinyl banner that everybody fights over the cents, on the soft signage, we're talking on some of them premium application that can be sell also as a premium price.
Mhm.
So also from the ROI standpoint.
Thanks. Now, one more question I had was that just came in. This person says they already offer soft signage, but they're kind of looking for that next stepping stone. And I think we've sort of talked about that here. I mean, like we said, the possibilities of sublimation are endless, but anyone kind of, what would you recommend from soft signage? Where would you go next? Based on what you guys have seen anyway. John?
There's 4 verticals. We probably all know them. So it's home decor and home goods. That's your next. A lot of people, they started out in soft signage. They started doing things like towels. That was the next thing, and then you could do shower curtains. So that's one area. You get into the whole thing of personalization and your decoration. So that's a whole gamut of products. Holy crap! You've got mugs. You've got photo gifting, you've got all those different products, you've got canvas materials that you can get into. And then lastly, of course, the bigger market that's besides soft signage is apparel. And that whole apparel goods, you look at socks, for example, all these verticals that are out there that you can do, that you can't do just with, if you're just with printing, traditional color printing, you're kind of like, all right, this is the kind of project I can work on. And as Randy pointed out, it's really your imagination. And I think that's the beauty. That's why I love this technology. It's just, it has so many different flexible options.
Well, the on-demand print business has really accelerated that. I mean, I think over the last 18 months, we can all agree that the on-demand world has just exploded. Much of those products are dye sub printed products already, from the mugs and small wares and rigid wares that Randy's mentioning, all the way through to printed pillows and apparel and home textile goods and facial masks, everything. I think for a traditional PSP that's not really focusing on the on-demand space right now, I think that's a really strong area to be focusing, because much of the products that you're producing today already for soft signage, the process is more or less the same, other than you just have a different vertical you're chasing.
Great, thanks. All right, well, unless anyone wants to add anything, I wanted to thank you all for participating today. A recording of the webinar is going to be available on digitaloutput.net right after we finish. And we also are going to include a full feature article on textile printers for soft signage in our July issue, which is shockingly, if you can believe it, available in a few weeks. The months are passing by. Thank you again, everybody, for joining me today. And I appreciate you sharing your insight on this very interesting segment that we are all experiencing.
Thanks,
Thanks
Melissa.
for having
Thanks,
us.
guys.
Thanks, Melissa.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.